Are there certain craftsmen or skill sets that people come for this area looking for?
Um, Actually, we've established ourselves, and I've said this time and time again. I will put our crews up against any crew anywhere in the world,
Across the board.
across the board.
Hey, welcome to the opening scene. Why are shows choosing Georgia, New York, and now even Europe over places like Maryland, DC, and Virginia? And what would it actually take for the DMV to become a competitive film hub in the next decade? Some of these questions are shaping headlines right now, from tax credits to soundstage shortages to even the ripple effects of the recent Hollywood strikes. And we're not even talking about mergers. And today's guest is one of the few people who sit in some of those decision-making conversations for this area. David O'Farrell is the business agent for IATSE Local 487, representing nearly 1,000 crew members across grip, electric, sound, crafts, props, construction, set dressing, and more. He negotiates contracts, advocates for tax incentive reform, and is on the front lines of the conversations determining whether productions come here or they have to go somewhere else. In this episode, we break down tax incentives, why the DMV loses shows to other states, how our crews stack up against the rest of the country, whether AI is a threat or a tool, and what's the next 5 to 10 years realistically look like for our region. This is the opening scene of David O'Farrell.
David, thank you so much for joining me. This is super exciting. Not often we get to talk with someone who has the business acumen. When we talk about show business, the importance of what your role is cannot be understated. But sometimes people don't even necessarily know who you are, what it is that you do. And so the first question I really just want to ask you is, can you describe to me what a business agent of a IATSE union is?
Sure. What do you want a little background on IATSE, and we'll go from there?
I think that'd be perfect.
So first off, David O'Farrell. I'm the business agent for the Mid-Atlantic Student Mechanics Local 487 of the IATSE. And that's a international organization that represents people all across the entertainment spectrum. So not just motion picture and television, but stage, live events, just so many things, animation, editing. And specifically, my area is Maryland, DC, and Virginia. We represent the majority of the crew. Camera is a national local. 798, which is makeup and hair, has an East Coast jurisdiction. 161 is production coordinators, production supervisors, production accountants, and script supervisors. And then we're pretty much the rest of the crew: grip, electric, sound, special effects, first aid, craft service, set dressing, construction, paint, props, greens, so everything else. So we're the credits at the end of the movie. So when you watch a movie, watch the credits. A TV show, that's who we are. I am the business agent for the local, so I'm responsible for any business that the local does. I assist our international with negotiations of our contracts, either in person, like we did with our area standards agreement, which is our national agreement, or just consulting on what's affecting us in, say, our commercial agreement or our low budget agreement. So when a show comes in, we're giving them our roster, our membership list of people that's broken down by the departments they work in. We're interpreting with them, and along with, if it's a studio, the labor relations or the lawyers that have been hired for independent projects, the terms and conditions of the contract. It's also advocacy. Part of my job is working with government, both on the local level, but state and federal, on issues that affect our industry. Most of that has to do with tax credits. The entire industry now, revolves around tax credits. And it's really the first question that you get, or a film office would get, is what do you have in your program? Not, do you have locations that work? How's the crew base, which is what it used to be. Now it's how much do you have, and what of that can we get?
Yeah.
And and it is a business, and they go where the best incentives are available. I'm on the Maryland Governor's Entertainment Industry Council.
Yeah.
And we work not just on issues with film and television, but with animation, with AI, with anything that touches entertainment in Maryland. The arts take part in those meetings, the arts groups. And it's all an effort to bring work here.
Mm-hmm.
And make it a viable place for shows to shoot, so that the people who are here don't have to leave and go elsewhere to work.
If I'm a new person coming to the industry in this area, especially since that's what this local 487, correct,
right,
union represents, in certain crafts, that is.
Right.
How do you join? What is that path to actually getting accepted or being allowed into being in such a space?
Well, we're an open membership.
Okay.
We're not like some unions you may have heard and it's not you go through a lengthy apprenticeship or any like that. But I will tell you, we have a prospective members meeting once a month. We used to have people come in person. Now they can do it over Zoom. You can find that on our website, www.IATSE487.org. We spend more time trying to talk you out of it than into it.
Why is that?
Because it's an incredibly tough industry to be in.
Oh, wow.
Just because you join, we don't place you on jobs. It's producer's choice.
Got you.
Now, if a producer wants to hire somebody brand new over somebody that's been doing it for 30 years, as long as they're in the union, that's fine. Within legal parameters, all good. But it's a tough industry to break into. And one of the reasons why we focus so much on advocacy and on tax credits, incentives, whatever you want to call them, is there needs to be the jobs in order to have enough work to place new people in.
Yeah, yeah.
When there's only one or two shows going on, the people who have been doing it for a while tend to be the ones who are hired. But it's just there are only a certain number of crew positions available. Now, if it's something massive, like Lioness, which Paramount Plus in Baltimore a couple years ago, we had Lioness, we had Lady in the Lake going on. There was a show in Richmond or two. When you have multiples like that, then there's opportunities for people to come in. But what comes after that?
Yeah.
There are no guarantees. So I can't tell, I don't know what's coming after the first of the year.
Wow. Is that that normal?
Yeah.
Okay.
So, sometimes you get some lead time on it, but, the industry has changed so much in the last few years. COVID had an effect, certainly, but the strikes of a couple of years ago changed the business models for the studios, the streamers, and there's still things being figured out. There's probably, this may be a slight exaggeration, but there may be we're looking at a third less work than they used to do. Now, that's at a time when they used to do, a couple years ago, there were 600 scripted projects. So that's not counting reality. That's not counting, but actually scripted projects between cable and streaming and theaters. That number's going to cut down drastically. There has been work that's been going to Europe. Some of that has to do with, the wages are pennies on the dollar there, and they have universal health care. So there's not that health and retirement payments they're doing.
It's the business side of it.
So it's the business side of it, exactly. But that doesn't mean there's not work being done here. California is beginning to ramp back up again. New York's seeing a resurgence. The country is seeing work, maybe not at the levels some of us were used to, like a Georgia, but it is coming back. And it's just then there becomes the advocacy part about, okay, what are we doing working with film offices or legislators or whatever to draw that work in?
Well, I guess from your perspective, what are those unique, I guess, challenges and opportunities that this area represents in comparison to these other markets that we're talking about right now, like the New Yorks, the Los Angeles, Atlanta, Chicago, so forth and so on?
The biggest thing we're lacking here is actual soundstage space. Okay. It's very limited, and what is around isn't very big. And so shows want soundstage space. Just because a show like House of Cards came in, rented warehouse space in north of Baltimore, in Joppa, and essentially put quite a bit of money into converting the space, into soundproofing it, into putting in air handling, a massive air handling unit to cool and heat the space. It used to be you could heat a soundstage space with the lights, but now the LEDs all run cool. So not quite some of the problems we used to have. But they turned that into a production facility where they were able to do their builds there. They had space for that. They had office space nearby. It was they got another warehouse just about a quarter of a mile or so up the road to do builds in, and had a wonderful little complex going. But they put quite a bit of money into a traditional warehouse space.
Yeah.
I've worked on shows myself back in the 80s where, you're in an old warehouse, it's musty, everybody gets a respiratory ailment before they get out of there, and every time it rains, you have to stop because it's a tin roof. Or we were next to train tracks, and you'd have a freight train go by.
It's kind of tough to shoot, right?
So really the most lacking thing is the soundstage space. The problem becomes, it's not if you build it, they will come.
Yeah.
It's, would it get used? Yes, but there's that downtime. So we've been working with different organizations. I worked with a set of developers for a while. We've talked to some of the schools about joint efforts where maybe they build a 15,000 square foot sound stage that they use to train their students because they have a film program, but it can be rented out to a show. That only becomes problematic if it's a series, because a series like a House of Cards is going to want to build the sets and leave the sets up.
Yeah.
I can tell you, one of the saddest days I've ever had on a show was with House of Cards, watching them tear down the White House we built. It just got used to being there, and all of a sudden seeing it come down. So those kind of logistics are what's problematic. If they're doing locations work, that's not a problem. Yeah. If they're doing something like you've got the Wire poster up, the Wire used most practical locations. They had the bullpen for the detectives set up and built.
Is that at a soundstage, or they found like a space, a building
that was actually it was originally in an old, I don't think it was a Walmart, but it was a shopping center on Eastern Avenue, and they moved out to Columbia to a space that used to be a car dealership that is now the Wegmans in Columbia.
Okay, inside information. I love it.
And oddly enough, if you stood on the roof of the Wegmans, you can see the warehouse that Veep used to do their builds in Columbia.
Now, you've talked about three different, or you said The Wire, you mentioned Veep, but you also mentioned House of Cards. The Wire, again, went very practical. Veep kind of has some sense of like using a warehouse space, if you will, but the House of Cards warehouse space, as you mentioned, what happens with it now, or what has happened with it now? Because you said there's this thing of like, you build it, they might not come.
It's back to warehouse space.
Wow.
I think at one point next door they were storing lottery machines. And prior to the show going in there, I think it was, I want to say Macy's, and somebody's gonna call and go, I listened to the podcast and you were wrong. It was a heck company. But they converted I think it was the first storage that was there into a green screen and really unique lighting setup for doing driving shots. We're innovative. We're creators.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter if you are the producer, an executive producer, a studio exec. Well, studio executives aren't creative, and that'll come back to bite me. But you know, down to the crew, the grips are creative.
Yeah.
The electrics are creative. The set dressing people are amazingly creative. Props, because you know everything you see in that scene, somebody had something to do with to get it there.
Yeah.
Even in a practical location. It's been funny. I've gone to congressional hearing rooms for events, and we kind of laugh because if we were making a congressional hearing room, we'd never use it because it looks so bland. We'd do something else to make it look better.
Yeah.
So, like for House of Cards, at one point, parts of Congress were built in this same warehouse. They had a Learjet that they bought and took the wings off of and the engine off of and redid the inside to look like a private jet, but it was sitting in the warehouse. They built, you know, Air Force One, which was next to the press briefing room, which was not near the Oval.
They found ways to do it.
And that's it. But that's the key to the industry is everybody involved with it is creative, and it's their hard work that goes into it. And that's what I'm representing. It's making sure people are paid properly, fairly, and taken care of for their skill set.
So before the break, we were talking about just the unique challenges, but then also you started to dive a little bit more into the beauty of the craftsmen that make a space its unique space. Like we could look at the blank walls of Congress halls and like think like that's what it's supposed to be, but the people who come in and make it an actual congressional hall room, are there certain craftsmen or skill sets that people come for this area looking for?
Actually, we've established ourselves, and I've said this time and time again, I will put our crews up against any crew anywhere in the world.
Across the board.
Across the board. We've, you know, when you see the builds when we're building the White House, which we've done the Oval so many times. But for the builds we've done, our top craftspeople, I'll put them up against anybody anywhere, are the people who, you know, paint the spaces. Mm-hmm. Nobody better. Our set dressers in creating whatever that space needs to be for whatever period that needs to be. And we've done Civil War, we've done Victorian era, we've done the 60s, we've done the 70s, we've done the present. You know, we've done colonial times. We've done pre-colonial times. So, you know, for those folks, for the props people, you know, putting the right thing in the actor's hand, you know, because props are generally anything that the actors use or wield. It's you know, those skill sets, to greens, to making it look like it's lush, or if it's winter. You know, we had a show years ago where it was winter when we were shooting, and they were stapling leaves to a small tree out in front of the house, so it looked like it was spring.
That's dedication right there.
It is, to, you know, the lighting to make it look natural, and that's a combination of the electric crew, the lighting technicians, and the grip department, down to craft service. A fed crew is a happy crew. And craft service went from something when I started where you got maybe a 6-foot folding table that had a coffee urn on it, and there was a cooler with sodas and some waters, and you might get some fruit and some candy and some chips to, they have trucks now where they can create meals for the crews, so they're serving sandwiches throughout the day, and healthy foods, making them available, taking into account people's dietary needs, to having medics on set, so that if something, God forbid, does happen, there is somebody there. You don't have to wait for a first responder to come in, and most days, maybe they're giving some people some Advil or some aspirin, but when something goes wrong, and it has, you want somebody trained. And these are usually, they're EMTs, they're first responders who are doing this in addition. Set teachers. So when there's children on set, welfare workers, to make sure that they're not worked more hours and that they're limited in the number of hours that they can work on these productions. I'm trying to think of all the departments right now because costumes. I'll put our costumers up against anybody anywhere in the world. And again, we've done everything from pre-colonial times to, grand balls in Washington, D.C., where everybody's in tuxes and gowns, to, Secret Service agents and Park Police and Baltimore City Police, and having those people, there are no better crews available, and it's been a struggle because sometimes shows will want to bring somebody with them. And we've made great strides in being able to get our people into key positions, so they're not having to pay to put somebody up or give them per diem and travel. Because I cover Virginia, years ago we did a film, New World, about the Jamestown colony. And, it was our crews that built Jamestown for the show. And they built it, partially built, and then they built nearby the full fort for it. So many of the props, much of the set dressing had to be created for the show, or they went around. The set dressing will go to, and this was something, they interact with small businesses in the areas. So if they need furniture, whether it's period or contemporary, they go to antique shops, to businesses, and get what they need for the show. Same with props. Artwork can be bought locally. So much of that, it spills out into the community. It's not just, this show, or one of the biggest misconceptions about tax credits is, they just take their money and go back to California with it, or it's going to the high salaried actors. If you read the law, there are limits on what it can go for. So it doesn't go for the high. But it's also, these companies come in and spend money with these, not just antique stores and furniture companies, but lumber companies, paint,
hotels, restaurants,
so much else. And, the impact on one lumber company was, because we had a number of shows in, and it was a number of good years, they added on to their facility and created a retirement program for their employees and put new employees on. And all this money's found money. And what I mean by that is, without it, it's not going to be here. So if a show's going to spend $60 million in a location, that's $60 million of new money that these businesses never would have seen without the show coming in, that these areas wouldn't have seen. So it's an economic development issue. It's a jobs issue. But, every time you spend, if a show spends thousands of dollars on food, and it may be a Costco or it may be something, but the Costco employees get paid.
Yeah.
Then they pay their mortgage, or they pay their auto insurance, or they put food on their table.
Mm-hmm.
So that's money, again, getting spent in the community. Those employees go out to dinner. They go to the movies, hopefully. So it's this big economic engine.
Yeah.
And a lot of that gets lost in that, well, if, they're spending $50 million and we're giving them 10, but that's $50 million that never would have been spent, and that 50 is getting spent multiple times in the communities. Shows like The Wire would go into communities and hire locals as part of the security team. Or shows would go into neighborhoods and give money for renting out community centers for lunch, or the impact on schools, like Swagger in Virginia. One of the principals just wrote a terrific letter about what it meant to have a show shooting in their school, and the fact that people from the show talked to the kids and how energized they got about it. Education is something that we feel is hugely important, not just for our members, but outside of that. Within our local, we've got an individual who is doing outreach to colleges currently, and we've always kind of done it. It's one of those things, you get a little momentum and things get in the way.
Yeah.
And on both sides.
Sure.
But we're very big on making sure our members are trained so that they are working safely and they are advancing their skill set.
I would love to understand where we currently are, and I know like DC has its program, Maryland and Virginia has like their own separate program. So if you could briefly explain like where they currently are, but then also where, at least even from your own advocacy, where you hope to get to when it comes to the tax incentive or tax credit program.
Well, I'm just a boy with a dream. I'd love them to be uncapped and we get everything in the world, but that's not realistic. I've been around long enough that I've been at the beginning of all of those programs. DC's they've got the most flexibility, I think, in what they can do with their program. There's not a hard number that's locked in. But again, they're not seeing the long-term shows, so it's maybe a few hundred thousand to a couple of here and there. And DC's kind of an odd duck because it's tied to the federal government funding. So that one's odd. In Maryland, currently the program is funded at $12 million a year. It was at 20. Last year was a tough economic year. But instead, what they didn't do was do away with the program in its entirety. They just shaved $8 million off it and left it at 12. But there is other money there that's available for shows. And right now there's a $10 million per project cap. They're talking about getting rid of that cap. But I will say shows like Lioness and Lady in the Lake accepted the $10 million cap. But again, we're working through the Maryland Entertainment Industry Council and talking with them. It's something Commerce wants to see happen, and that's what we're going to work towards.
I love that.
And then hopefully increase funding down the road, which has always been the goal.
Yeah.
We don't need to be uncapped. We don't need to spend, $1 billion to get $2 billion worth of work like a Georgia does. But it would be nice if we were bringing in enough work regularly that we could get opportunities for people coming out of schools, because they're great film programs throughout the region. All of these things are out there and these opportunities, which are great, but you've got to have some place to go after that.
Yeah.
And that's again, back to the advocacy portion of trying to make it so that there can be these opportunities. So if somebody comes out of school, they don't have to go, all right, I got to move to LA. Because, you move to LA, you're one of
Millions.
thousands. Yeah, there isn't quite millions of us yet in the industry, but we're close.
Okay, I thought.
But that or New York, and then it's, how do you break in? Here it's how do you break in? But it's about, let's at least try to have those opportunities so people who want to be doing it. I mentioned before, we're an open membership. We have the prospective members meeting where we spend more time trying to talk you out of it because of how tough the industry is. But if this is what you want to be doing, if this is where you see your life, go for it. There's no reason not to. There's no reason not to create your own project. And if you're not a good writer, find somebody who is. Production is a team sport.
To me, at least to my knowledge, there's a lot of indie productions that happen here that may not necessarily meet the threshold to access some of those tax incentives in Maryland, Virginia, or DC. And so I'm curious if there are efforts or if there's ways that those smaller scale productions are still able to access some type of tax credit or incentives, or be supported in other ways in this area to still thrive and have films made here.
Well, the film offices are all terrific in that they will help out. And they may find ways of doing it. So maybe if the production is so small that the spend doesn't qualify for a cash return and for the credit, but they have other ways to help streamline things with permitting, with helping you find locations, with pointing you to, if you're unsure where to go, for help with casting. So they can have a wealth of information that they can share that way. In Maryland, Maryland actually has a 10% set aside of their yearly amount so that's set aside for Maryland-based production companies, which has a lower threshold than the full tax credit does on the spends.
The Maryland, like the math in that, if I'm listening to this and I don't understand like the math with the 10% set aside, like where is it coming from?
Like currently so the program that's set up in Maryland is currently funded at $12 million. 1.2 of that so when these programs they renew in July, along with fiscal years. And we can spend hours on why a fiscal year starts in July.
We'll leave that one for an accounting session.
Yeah. So there's 1.2 set aside that becomes available for these production companies but again, they're Maryland-based companies that can access that. And the threshold on what their actual spend is, I believe, is lower than what the spend has to be on for the larger productions that come in. So it's an opportunity to foster that local talent and to give people the opportunity. They're not getting, they don't fund the project. You've got to have the funding, but you can get something back, and maybe, what you get back helps with post. Helps with other aspects of it. No one's got a program right now where they will out and out fund the program or your project. But having these credits available at the end of the project can make a difference.
Last question. Why is filmmaking important to you?
I've always loved film and television. I've loved the process. I've been a student of it. I was a student of it as a teenager. And that was at a time when you didn't have all these making ofs and behind the scenes stuff, so it was reading every book that came out on the industry. Oddly enough, I was a political science major in college. I got the opportunity to work at City Hall in Baltimore. This was in the mid 80s, early 80s, and early 80s. And politics wasn't my cup of tea. I just decided, I don't want to do this. So I switched from the college I was at to Towson University, started taking then it was mass comm, but they had film classes, and just fell in love with the process and, stuck with the industry. And as we talked about my process before, I started out as a production assistant. The first film, I did some commercial work, and then I did a film called Clara's Heart with Whoopi Goldberg. And it just kind of kept progressing from there. The odd thing is I got out of politics, and because I loved film and wanted to be part of that industry, and now I spend a good portion of my time dealing with politics. Whether it's on, like I said, on the municipal level, state level, federal level, I've been involved in different things. So I guess, taking that union job to help out, knowing I could help out people in the industry and people I'd worked with, no good deed goes unpunished.
I love it. Said, do you have a question?
I know you mentioned about, the need for more studios in this area, right? For sound stages in this area. One place that comes to mind, which might be a crap shot, would be the Six Flags location. What's your thoughts on that? Like, let's say if there was an opportunity to give some sort of pitch, do you think that would be a great location for like a soundstage, with it being like somewhat up like in the middle between like a Baltimore and like a DC?
Oh, absolutely. Certainly a space like that. And I mentioned earlier I was working with a group of developers in Prince George's County, which is Six Flags is in PG. And the idea was for a complex where the front portion of it would be retail and restaurants, and have a big theater space that could be used for screenings, but could also be used for community events and everything, and then build sound stages behind it. A number of locations were looked at. Certainly Six Flags would be great. Around the racetrack.
Bowie racetrack?
Not Bowie. What's the horse track?
Laurel's racetrack.
Around there was a golf course that was looked at. There was a property that was unfortunately under the flight path of Andrews Air Force Base. But it became about, then it becomes about finding the investors. It's not necessarily something that the state may get involved in. The way to get the state involved is hopefully through a state school, working with them to come up with a program where they could have places for their students to work in a real environment, but that would be available for some things. Morgan University actually bought, there was Flight 3 stages in Baltimore near the campus. They're currently about to make those available again for rental and for classes. For a long time they had it. It was storing dorm furniture. But we'd love to see, even, and it doesn't need to be a university or a college, a community college, which is a college, but, working with them about paths to get into the industry. But again, it becomes about having the opportunities once they get done.
Yeah.
BET stages are available for rental. The old BET stages. So there are smaller stages around. They're maybe not the 15, 20, 25,000 square foot stages that are specifically built. And part of the problem becomes it isn't if you build it, they will come. Well, do I firmly believe they will get used? Yes. But is it a year-round booking because it's a show went in with the idea of multiple seasons? And is that something a school can do where they basically block it off,
For
and during the and then during the school year, traffic and parking, and it's about having enough room to park trucks, to park the crew. But there have been talks, University of Maryland, Morgan, several other of the programs out there, and then some programs in Virginia. There's a couple of possibilities, but funding really becomes the major issue on doing that.
Hey,
Lightning round?
Lightning round. It's called Last Looks. It is presented by no one.
Yet.
I love that. I love everyone's enthusiasm around that. All right, David. Here we go. Super quick, short answers. Have fun with it. First document a first-time producer must read before calling you.
Contract. IA contract.
IA contract. One song that instantly makes a tough day feel doable.
Won't Get Fooled Again, The Who.
Okay. Shout out one craft department that doesn't get enough love.
I am not touching that one with a 10-foot pole because I represent them all.
One local spot that's always looking cinematic on camera.
Washington, D.C.
What's the first thing you do when you rap?
Usually I drive home in absolute quiet.
Biggest 2026 bottleneck.
Funding for tax credits.
Well, thank you, David. This has been fun.
Yeah, I enjoyed it. Anytime.
I'm glad.
I have hours more I can do. So if you want to turn this into a series of just me, not other people. There's nobody else in the industry.
You're the one that we need to
Yeah, it's just me.
That's all.
All right.
David.
My pleasure.